nervous system, what does it do? Now, in all these body systems, we'll talk about their function. So what does that body system do? What would you say about the nervous system? Maya?
Like Nicholas said, it connects to the brain and it tells kind of what things want to do. And sometimes it's like signals.
Okay. Yeah. And I would say not only does it connect to the brain, but it includes the brain. The brain is a part of the nervous system. And it doesn't. It's responsible for sending information around various parts of the body. Taking information in, sending information out. Those things are accomplished by the nervous system. And so the nervous system allows our bodies to respond to what we call stimuli. Remember back when we talked about living things and I smacked my ruler and you guys all jumped? Okay? And a stimulus and response. And we mentioned it then. So stimulus, if you think back to that, is some information coming in. It could be information about a loud noise going in through your ears. It could be an eraser flying at your face. Or it could be internal information about what your the pH level of your blood or how much glucose is in your blood, what your body temperature is. So that's all information, stimuli that our nervous system takes in. And then, if necessary, our nervous system allows us to respond to that. So we're not going to get into too many major organs of the nervous system, just some of the basics. So obviously the brain. Brain is one of the key parts of the nervous system. It's protected by the cranium. And really the brain is where all the information is processed. So the images that we see, the sounds we hear, that information goes to the brain where it makes sense of it. The spinal cord attaches to the brain. Okay? And it runs down through our vertebrae. So again, you've seen this model of the spinal cord and the vertebrae before. So we have each individual vertebrae. There's a little tunnel down through the back of them. And through this tunnel runs the spinal cord. It's thick nerve tissue. And it takes information from our brain and carries that information to various parts of our body. It also takes information back up to our brain. Can I let you borrow one out of there? Just be quick. So our spinal cord is very important. That's why it is protected by these vertebrae so that it's not damaged. Okay. Then, branching off from the spinal cord itself, what you see are these little yellow things coming off of the side of the vertebrae. All of these green things that are in this diagram of the human, all of those are nerves. Again, more tissue similar to the spinal cord, similar to the brain, and these nerves actually take the signals to different parts of our body. Those are the main parts of the nervous system. Those are organs. We'll talk about the types of tissue and cells they're made of later in the notes. Okay, so how does our nervous system work? Well, it takes in information from our senses. And you know our senses, our five senses, our sight, taste, touch, smell. Okay. And our senses bring information from the outside world. So right now, as you're looking up at the screen, your eyes are taking in information. They see light coming in. They pass those images to your brain, where your brain then makes sense of it. Your brain looks at the pattern and says, okay, well, those are letters. And it changes, and it tells you what letters they are. It tells you which words they are. It lets you know the meaning of the words. So your brain processes all that information. Okay? That's the stimulus. Same time as I'm speaking, you're hearing, your ears are hearing the words that I'm saying. Now they start off, when I talk, it's just vibrating the air in this room in a certain way. That vibrates your eardrums a certain way. That vibration is passed through nerves to your brain. Your brain then processes these sounds. And then you're able to understand the words that I'm saying. Okay, so that's another stimulus. And then the response is how the body reacts to this stimulus. As you are looking and reading the words on the screen, taking that information into your brain, at the same time your brain is sending information to the muscles in your hand, in your arm. And it's allowing you to write out the notes that you're writing right now. Your brain is telling your muscles how to move. So, examples of stimuli. Being hungry is a stimulus. An internal stimulus that comes from within your body. Feeling cold. Tasting something salty. Seeing a bright light. Tasting something sweet. Those are all information that goes into our body. And examples of responses would be, avoiding an eraser coming at you, jumping, yelling, smiling, running. Any reaction that our body has is a response. Stimulus and a response. So if we go into a little bit more detail, the brain, it's in our cranium. It's made up of billions of nerve cells, individual nerve cells. One individual nerve cell is called a neuron. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And the brain interprets all the information, all the messages coming in. And obviously, you have information coming in constantly from what you hear, what you see, what you feel, from internal stimuli. Your brain is able to sort of multitask and take in that information, decide what's important, what's not important, what needs a response, what doesn't need a response. So all that happens in the brain. So the brain itself has many parts to it. Different sections, okay? And different parts of the brain actually do different things. Okay. So, pass around here so you can see. This is the brain of a sheep. Wrapped up. You don't squish it, but you can pass it around and look at it. And you can see it's made, it has all these folds in the tissue, a very complex structure. Okay? And we know through many experiments that different parts of our brain are responsible for different things. We have an area of our brain which is responsible for us to speak. One part which helps us to move, and coordination, emotions. All these things are controlled by different portions of our brain. So this is from a sheep, so it's obviously smaller than our own brain, but the structure is quite similar. It's in plastic. Don't worry about it. All right. So connected to the brain is the spinal cord, which I'll pass around as well. This is a cow's section of a cow's spinal cord. Brains to go.com. and then still does it from spinal cord depot. So anyway, yes, our brain is made of all this nerve tissue. Guys, Daniel, listen please. So it's connected to our spinal cord, and like we said, the base of our brain connects to the spinal cord, which runs down the length of our back, through the vertebrae, which help to protect it. And it basically is like a highway between our brain and the other parts of our body, carrying information. It's protected by our vertebrae or our backbone.
Isn't the cow's spinal cord?
Yep. Fine?
Can you break your nervous system?
Yes.
Oh.
So we're going to talk about this. So, for example, y'all done with the brain? Yes. So let's just imagine for a second, as I'm walking around right now, pacing around the room like I usually do, my brain is telling my leg muscles how to move. So my brain sends a message. It travels all the way down my spinal cord. Now, if it's telling my leg muscles how to move, that message goes way down to here, and then the message goes through these nerves to my leg muscles and tells them to move. For me to move my hands around like this. Now again, my brain is telling the muscles in my arm how to move. Sends the message down my spinal cord. To move my arms, the message then comes out through nerves over here to my arm muscles, telling my arms how to move. If a person damages their spinal cord, damages this tissue, what happens is, let's say, due to a car accident, a person damages their spinal cord down here. It could be severed, cut in half completely. Okay? Well, the brain still can tell their leg muscles, all right, I want to walk. Here's how you should move. The message goes down the spinal cord. But then it gets to the damage, and the message cannot get any further. So the message can't get to the leg muscles, even though they're still there and they still would work fine, but the message from the brain to the legs is not able to get there, and therefore a person can't move their legs. A spinal cord injury could result in what we call paralysis, not being able to move a part of your body because the messages telling those muscles to move cannot get there. At the same time, a person may lose feeling in their legs. And it's for the same reason. You know, if you poke somebody in the legs and they've been paralyzed, the message that you're touching them may get up to the brain, but then it can't continue on up to the brain for them to actually process that. And so damage to the spinal cord can result in the loss of use of certain parts of our body. Now, how much of a loss there is mostly depends on how high up the damage is. So if the damage is higher up in the spinal cord, a person can lose the loss of more parts of their body. If it's very high up here, then they may lose the use of both their legs and their arms. Again, so the higher up a spinal cord injury happens, the more dangerous it can be. The more parts you lose loss of, because again, then all of these nerves can't get the information if the damage is up here. All right, a few questions. Eddie?
Like if does your spinal cord,
Yep.
will that control like your organs too? Like say you damage it out front
Yep.
and send messages to your organs, so you probably won't survive if it was high enough.
It can. So some people that have a spinal cord injury, if it's pretty high, they lose control of their diaphragm, which controls your breathing. Okay? And they may have to be put on a ventilator, a machine that basically inflates and deflates their lungs because they're not able to use their diaphragm. So yeah, it can. It can be fatal. If it's a very high spinal cord injury, a person may not survive that. The other thing about a spinal cord injury is spinal tissue doesn't heal very well. It's not like a bone where if you break a bone completely, it will heal itself. New bone will fill in. Nerve tissue does not regenerate nearly as well. So most of the time, a complete break in the spinal cord lasts forever. Right? So it does not heal very well. And that's a very active area of research in medicine, sciences. How can we allow for this damage to be repaired? How can we fix it? Now, sometimes there are also other ways using electronics and electrical impulses where they can sort of take information the brain is sending, change it into electrical signal, and send it to either a prosthetic limb or a muscle that's there. So there's other types of technology and research going on as well. Alan?
So when you break your skull, what is it like? What is it?
Yeah, if it's a full break, yes, then usually means the loss of some part of your body. Okay? Then some of those messages, and you may lose some use or one side or the other. It all depends on sort of how that break happens. Connor?
And Mrs. Paul's in your study class, we learned what neurons were.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, good. We're going to be going over that next slide. That's cool. Oh, because of talking about brain, how the brain learns and stuff like that? Cool. Is that recent or back at the beginning of the year?
Right now.
Oh, cool. All right. I'm impressed. All right. So our nervous system, and you probably talked about reinforcing those pathways, and that's how you learn, and messages get sent faster, and myelin. That's great. So the nervous system communicates using something that we call nerve impulses. When I say the brain sends information here or receives information, really this works like something called a nerve impulse, which is sort of a signal that goes from one place to another. Okay? And it starts as a stimulus, and the brain can then send out a response. And our nervous system uses a combination of electrical impulses and chemical signals. It's one of the reasons why getting electrocuted is very dangerous, because it can interfere with the functioning of our nervous system, because our nervous system uses electrical signals to pass information from one place to another. So when your nervous system is made of nerve tissue, which you know is made of cells, and the type of cell it's made of are called neurons. A neuron is a nerve cell. And it has a very unique shape, or we would call it structure, that allows it to actually do its job, to carry information from one point to another. That's what neurons do. They send and receive information. So this is a neuron, what one looks like. It has various parts. The sort of largest area of the neuron, the central area, is called the cell body. And inside of that cell body is where you would find like the nucleus and many of the other organelles. And then surrounding the cell body are all of these branches that lead off of it. They're called dendrites. You could think of it as each of those little branches, each one is sort of listening for a signal from some other neuron. Then there's a long part of the neuron, this long extension. It's called the axon. And at the end of the neuron is the terminal, the little ends. And so a message gets sent down the dendrites, down the axon to the terminal, and then goes on after that. That's just a thing that maybe we'll watch after. Here's another image of a neuron, just drawn a little differently. Again, we have all the parts labeled: the cell body, the nucleus, the dendrites, the axon, the terminal. And then what you see is this is the start of the next nerve cell, which will continue on. Okay. So the cell body is sort of like the main headquarters of the cell. It's where the nucleus is and other organelles. Attached to that are the dendrites, which are listening. They pick up messages from other neurons. There's many, many branches of these dendrites. And what they do is they turn an electrical signal and transmit it down the axon. So there's a tiny bit of electricity that goes down this neuron, just like it's sort of like a little electrical wire, taking that electrical impulse from the dendrites down to the terminal. The axon is what carries that message. Eventually, the message gets all the way down to the end of the axon. It ends at a terminal. That's sort of the end of one neuron. And then you have a little gap, a little space. The neurons don't actually connect with each other directly. There's a little gap there called the synapse. It's a little space. But the neurons are still able to get a message across that space, across that synapse. Now, what you notice here, on this axon, these blue things, that's sort of insulation. You know how electrical wires have insulation around the outside? That's like insulation. It's called myelin. And this myelin helps the nerve impulse get sent more quickly and more efficiently from the dendrites down to the terminal. And the more an individual neuron is used, the more that myelin builds up and the message gets sent quicker and quicker. Okay? This is why, as we practice certain things, we get better at them. For example, how many people play an instrument in this room? All right. Do you remember when you first started to play that instrument? And you had to play like a certain scale. What instrument do you play, Maya?
Piano.
Piano. So you're playing a certain scale, right? And when you first learned, you had to like look at all the keys. You had to think about which keys you were going to press, in which order, which finger you're going to use. Now, if you go back today, after years of practice, do you need to think about that scale? No, it just happens automatically. And one of the reasons is because you have practiced so many times that the pathway from your brain to the muscles in your hand has been built up with insulation, so it happens very quickly, and you barely need to think about it. It happens in sports, in language, in any learning. This is how we learn things. It's how we become better at things, by building up that insulation. And the good news is that the more you use those pathways, the more you practice something, the more you study, the better you get at that. And so we know our brain can grow. James, have a seat. We're not done yet. Guys, sit down. We're not done until I'm done, so have a seat. And so practice, all those things can make our brain better and can reinforce those pathways. And that's what learning is all about. Building up that myelin so that those nerve impulses happen more quickly. We know the science about how we learn things now. And that's an exciting area of research today. All right, we'll finish up tomorrow.